This is Earth. And you know Earth, because, well, we live on Earth. Unless you live on Mars. But I don't know if anybody out there would be interested enough in my videos. But Earth has life, from simple squirrels to strange little geckos, from the smallest of ants to the largest of whales, to the cutest of creatures, to some of the weirdest creatures, to some of creatures that are downright disturbing. You can find life pretty much anywhere. I mean, look in the deepest parts of our ocean. You can find some of the most creepiest things out there. Which is creepy. But this is on our planet. This is pretty basically normal for Earth. But what about aliens? I mean, if aliens saw our life, they'd probably think that they are really alien. And if we saw their life, we would probably, of course, think they're pretty alien. You might think of, well, stereotypical green creatures with large insectoid-like eyes and long limbs and fingers that dead creep into your night and kidnap humans to experiment on them. You might think of that. Or you might think of stranger animal-like creatures that have multiple limbs and other strange features that used to live on Mars. Or maybe, you believe that maybe alien life is just simple bacteria and microbes living on certain planets and moons, like Europa or Mars. And that is very interesting to think about. I mean, there could be anything. It could be all three of those. Or maybe it's something else. And this is my version of the aliens, known as Gura. Now, I already made Gura, but I didn't like the way it was going with the aliens and how the planet was. So I'm going to revamp it into this new and improved saga. So yes, we're going to improve it again. And basically, Gura is inspired by the Teeming Universe, made by Christian Klein, which is an amazing book you should definitely go read, which has some very interesting aliens, if I do say so myself, and Exobiotica, which is another very weird alien world. And those were pretty much the inspirations for my project. Oh, and these other projects, such as Project Zira and Project Opono. Those 4 projects is what has inspired me to create Gura and of its titular aliens. And the aliens are going to be a little bit different than in the first episode. They'll have different ones in different forms. So, I hope you enjoy. Starting off, this is the Sun, a K-type star known as Laura. Laura is a K-type star, like I just previously said. So its life cycle is going to be a little longer than our sun because it's a little smaller, which means the habitable zone of the stars is going to be a little bit closer. Laura is what gave rise to all these planets that we're going to be talking about. And speaking of the planets, this is the first planet, Gluma. Gluma is basically a hot, tidally locked planet, so one side experiences a never-ending day, one side experiences a never-ending night, and there's a midnight zone. But none of it's good because the planet does not have an atmosphere and has a weak magnetic field. No moons, just rocky expanse with craters. That is either hot, cold, or just right, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to stay on this planet. It's small, too, around the size of Mars. And this planet right here is Ruma. Now, Ruma is very strange. It has an atmosphere and may very well have life on it. Its atmosphere is actually very similar to Earth's. However, if life does evolve, it'd be somewhere very underground because there's not much liquid water on it. It is a hot world, filled with volcanoes and sulfur in its atmosphere, which is not the best, but the sulfur luckily isn't that much. But if life does evolve, it would need to take various evolutionary routes to exist on this planet that's bigger than Earth, around the size of 2 Earths, around the same gravity too. And this is Gura. Gura is the main planet we'll be talking about in this episode. It definitely does have life. It has large liquid oceans and continents, as well as 2 moons. These moons are going to make up many of the foundations for life on the planet. The moons are known as Ruganus and Suganus. Ruganus and Suganus. Suganus is the moon that is perfectly spherical and has a very bright tan color. Gluganus is the planet the moon that is not really spherical, not even close. It's more like a giant meteorite. And Gura is going to definitely house our titular alien life. Moving past Gura, this is a gas giant known as Sloom. Now, Sloom is similar to Saturn in size, and has similar Saturnus rings. However, it only has 2 confirmed moons, that being Coom and Loom. Coom and Loom exist there. Now, Coom might actually have a subsurface ocean on its surface that might indeed house life, it being the second most habitable place that more than likely does have life on its surface. The next planet we'll be talking about is Bloom. Now, Bloom is a gas giant bigger than Jupiter, which means this is a very large planet. This planet has only 3 confirmed moons, that being Zlusa, Torum, and Hulusum, which all orbit it, and its large interterial storms that are very large. It has 4 main giant superstorms, which would be able to pretty much destroy an Earth if we were hit by some of these storms, which would be a pretty large nightmare. None of its moons seem to have evidence of life, so more than likely this is where life begins to stop forming, as it starts to get cold. And speaking of cold, this is a far out planet. This planet is actually a dwarf planet, known as Abbott. Now, Abbott is a smaller moon, it's around the size of our moon, but it is indeed a dwarf planet. It almost resembles Pluto, but it's not as cold as Pluto per se, but it's still very cold. Like life, if it evolved here, more than likely will not evolve here because of its terrible freezing conditions, as it is far out into the cold, desolate range. And speaking of cold, this is the coldest place on the solar system, known as Lo. Now, Lo definitely does not have life. It is freezing and cold and desolate. But yes, Lo is a very harsh world, and is definitely not habitable. Now, you might notice something. In the background of most of the planets that we've been mentioning, there has been this strange bushels of colors. You probably don't know what that is, or maybe you just didn't even see it. But that is, in fact, this giant nebula. This nebula is known as the Birthing Nebula. Its nickname is also Mama Nebula. Now, this nebula is actually what gave rise to the entire Gura system, and Laura, which gave rise to all the planets and stuff. It is situated around this area of the Milky Way galaxy. So, Gura and Laura, its star, and all the other planets are relatively far away from Earth. It would take us very, very long time to reach Gura. And this nebula, of course, is what gave rise to Laura and its planets. So you can thank Mama Nebula for these star, which you can thank the star for the aliens we're going to discuss in this episode. Now, this is what Gura looked like during its beginning formations. It was a hot, lava-filled volcanic world with lava fields everywhere. Literally giant lava oceans with volcanoes everywhere. You could not live here. It was burnt, decrepit, and dark, only with the flying fires illuminating it. It was horrible. But enough about this, Gura. Let's go back to Sloom. Back then, Sloom had 3 confirmed moons, and one of these moons was named Tomb. Tomb definitely had oceans on its surface, more than likely mainly icy it was probably made up of ice, but it also had definitely a subsurface ocean. 'Cause this is what gave rise to the Giran Oceans. You might be wondering, well, how did this give rise to the Giran Oceans? It's from one main thing. Meteor clusters. An entire barrage of meteor clusters outside of the solar system entered the solar system and then crashed right through Tomb. And this sent Tomb right out of its orbit of Sloom. This caused Tomb to head straight towards Gura. And yes, it hit Gura. It slab-dab hit Gura right there and there. And this, along with all the barragey meteorites, crashed into its surface, caused chunks of Gura to be knocked off. This created its beautiful smoothie moon. But more meteorites were still heading towards Gura after the eternal accident. Some didn't get caught in Sloom's gravitational pull, and some were still heading towards Gura. One of the larger ones managed to actually get caught in Gura's orbit, thus causing its not so smooth, but still pretty awesome second moon. All this ice from Tomb crashed onto Gura, as well as some of the meteorites. All this ice had water on it, and all this water caused it to melt from all the raging fires and burning lava. This caused lots and lots of steam. More than likely, some of the other meteorites that were crashing down on Gura's surface potentially also had liquid water inside of their surface. This caused a lot of steam, and this steam caused rain. It rained for a very, very long time. Well, for thousands and thousands of years of time. Maybe even longer. This caused mass flooding among Gura, which caused its oceans. Some of the land managed to be pushed up by volcanic activity, thus creating the continents we know today on Gura. Some of these continents, and this is what the continents look like. There are 3 main continents. No real island chains during this beginning stage of time, except for a tiny one off the coast of this other strange-looking continent. So let's take a deep, deep dive into its continents. So this is the continent split up. There is Laura and North Laura. Because they're sitting on two opposite tectonic plates, they are separated among one another. Then there is Mari Terra. Mari Terra is a pretty large continent off the coast of the Nether Verged. And then there is Longa Terra. Longa Terra is the longest continent as well as the biggest continent. These continents so far are not very large, mainly being around the size of Earth continents. Laura is around the size of India. So the continents are definitely not large, comparable to that. The oceans are vast and beautiful. And yes. Life began to form pretty much instantly after the oceans started to flood. These vast oceans created vast life. Cells beginning life. And cells are gonna begin in these early oceans. which is going to be very good for, well, life. And these cells formed around hydrothermic vents, known as chemical soup from their vents. These were caused by the meteorites hitting the surface of Gura, which caused this chemical soup to be emitted. It is full of nutrients for cells, and it's going to be perfect for building blocks of life. And, well, yeah, of course, these hydronic vents are also what created life on Earth. Well, that we think of. And it's going to be similar to that on Gura. So you might be wondering, well, what's these simple organisms going to be? This might not look very special. It just looks like a simple, strange cell thing. But in fact, this is the most important thing on Gura's history for life. And this is LUCA. Now, LUCA stands for Last Universal Common Ancestor, which means all organisms on Gura's history can trace their origins back to these simple cells. They give rise to the prokaryotes and eukaryotes and all the other types of cells. As you can see, for LUCA, it has a genic membrane and a large surface area to contain the genetic material. It sucks up nutrients from the hydronic vents to create more of itself, basically cloning. Now, it's going to give rise to all of these organisms, similar to how Earth did it on our life. So, of course, this LUCA is going to be very, very important. Let's look at some of its earlier, descendants. This is a pluffle. Now, pluffles are a very early bacteria. They don't even move through the water. Instead, they just kind of clone themselves over and over and over again into great masses, which can turn into strange bacterial mats near the very bottom of the hydronic vents, which is what they feed on. They sure do love this stuff. I mean, it is soup. But they would just cluster around in thick mats around the surface of these hydronic vents. They don't really cause no harm as of yet. They're just simple prokaryotes. I wonder what some of their other descendants might take. Oh yeah, this. This is a more heterotrophic bacteria. Instead of eating simple high chemical soup from these hydronic vents, they feed off of other bacteria. They have flagella to basically chase down simple bacteria and munchy on them, and breaks through and eats their DNA, which makes it some of an early predator almost, but it's just a simple bacteria. But still, you should definitely, if you were a bacteria during this time, you should definitely watch out for these flagellic bacteria. Oh, maybe you should watch out for this too. This is a exodornix. An exodornix, you might not wonder what that is, or you might. But this is basically the first iteration of a virus on Gura, or disease. These branched off from LUCA and are very closely related to the bacteria. Each little branch on them have sharp little hairs that they use to stick to simple bacterias, in which they break through and suck out their DNA and create more of themselves, like a virus would. They are quite rare in the early Guran oceans, but still, if you're a bacteria, you definitely need to watch out for these early viruses that will hurt you very badly. Oh, but you don't have to worry about them really much. You have to worry about them in the dark, deep waters near the hydronic vents, but during the surface, you don't have to worry about them that much. Well, because up in the surface is the first eukaryote. This is an early plant cell. Now, they stay towards the top to get sunlight in thick mats that resemble algae at the very top of the water. Now, the way that they absorb light with their cells within inside them, the chemicals within them to absorb light, the chloroplast, basically it's purple to absorb the light that the K-type star Gura emits. So they absorb the wavelengths and reflect it, which makes these plants purple. So no green plants on Gura. The dominant color will be purple, similar to how well green is dominant on Earth. And then there's this, the second eukaryote, and basically the last divergence of cells, as of now. This is the first animal cell. The animal cells, unlike the plant cells, spend most of their time towards these hydrothermic vents down below, feeding off of bacteria and the chemical soup. They have simple organelles, a nucleus and a nucleolus to contain the DNA and also to control the rest of the organelles within the cell. These certain organelles produce certain things. Now, they have certain organelles that are basically the same as here on Earth, like the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. But there are others that do certain things. They also have Golgi bodies and cell walls, which is very interesting. These guys have strange organelles that do certain things, because this is an alien cell, not a cell from Earth. So it's gonna be a little different, but it's still very weird. I might make a video going more in depth onto the organelles, but I don't know. Let me know if I should do that. And these cells cluster together to form the first multicellular organism, a suckerlumper. Now, a suckerlumper looks similar to that of a rotifer on Earth, except they are more proto. They have a suction cup-like tail and strange organelle-like structures within their see-through body that basically make the organism think, digest, and other things. So basically, it's the first organs. They have hairs around their mouth to filter feed. They are blind, but still, this is every single animal, from the multicellular animals to the larger, not microscopic animals, can trace their origins to suckerlumpers. So you should pay these somewhat strange-looking rotifer copycats a little respect. Oh, and here's some of their descendants. This is a tube body. A tube body is a strange organism that resembles a sea sponge, except it's not. It has a long tube-like body with a similar suction cup similar to the suckerlumpurg, and it has an opening for a mouth. Now, yes, it does resemble sea sponges at a glance. They even litter the sea bed like a sea sponge in mass groups. But there's some things about them. They have organs, and that is something that sea sponges don't really have. This is the nervous system. The nervous system helps them feel things. It helps them detect vibrations in the water currents and helps them feel things. It also helps control all the organs in there. Sadly, though, they don't have a brain yet. Instead, it's just a cluster of nerves at the very top called a nerve net, which is very similar to many jellyfish here on Earth. Don't worry about them. I'm sure they might develop a brain in the future, but so far they just have these simple nerve nets and nerves around them. The second system is the digestive system. The digestive system starts at the throat, which moves downward into the pot-like stomach at the very bottom. The stomach has acids and bacteria inside of it that helps digest the food that it eats, which is marine snow, as these guys are sessile, which means they cannot move. So they just wait for stuff to fall into their suction vortex around their mouth, and then that's where they get the food from. And then it all turns into a sort of powderish dust, the stuff that's left over from the food at least. This powderish dust that's kind of mushy is then injected through the two anuses into the current. So these guys might have one mouth similar to organisms on Earth, but they have two butts. I wonder how that would work if they were on Earth. And then there's the reproductive system. The reproductive system This is the male reproductive system. The oval shape is a novatolon, and this is what produces the gametes, or sperm, in of its sac. And then these two openings above the anus is what ejects the sperm. Since these creatures are sessile, they cannot move to go find a partner. So they instead just eject their sperm out into the current in hopes that it finds some unfertilized eggs to repeat the cycle. That's how males reproduce. They're constantly producing more of this sperm until they eventually die. They only live for about a week or so. But then there is the female reproductive organ. The female reproductive organ is a bit more complicated than that. The very top part is what produces and grows the eggs within it. These eggs then move down to the sort of oval shape at the very bottom. This is where then they're ejected through the two openings also above the two anuses, in which they pump out their unfertilized eggs into the current and hope they can find some sperm so they can, well, create more. So it's kind of like broadcast spawning. Luckily, we don't do that. And this is what one of their eggs look like. Their eggs are pinkish in color and are pretty shiny. And the sperm and the eggs will cluster in pinkish white clouds that litter the ocean's top surface. And when the eggs hatch, they hatch out into this. This is the tube body's larva. The larvae are basically plankton. They cannot move, instead just float around the ocean current, grabbing up anything that's edible with their bristling tendrils at the very top. This is how they feed. The bristling tendrils are the only thing that moves, gathering food and stuffing it into the mouth, which then ejects through the anus. Eventually, though, they grow more flexibility bodies and larger, and eventually develop into the pupa. The pupa is the only stage in the life cycle that can actually move by slithering across the soils and sands. They don't really eat during this form. Instead, they just look for a nice place to roost. Once they find a nice place to roost, they develop a suction cup on the very back of their tails that slowly fuses them with the ground below, and it turns them into a tall, sessile, sponge-like organism. So that's how their life cycle works, and the two bodies are making it work below these ocean currents. And another organism is the strange stars. Now, the strange stars, of course, might resemble a starfish, maybe? Yeah, starfish. Except, unlike a starfish, which have 5 tentacle-like structures, these guys only have 4 structures, like tentacles. And now, at the very top, it doesn't look like they're doing much. Unlike their cousins, the tube bodies, these guys are not sessile and can actually move to go find a mate. And unlike starfish, though, they do not have eyes on the very tips of their tentacles. Instead, they have light-sensitive organs on the very top of their base that can sense light above them. Taking one and flipping it over, you can find that the muscles around the limbs is what helps them to move, slowly dragging them across the sand below, feeding on stuff. Their mouth is the large hole. This sucks up things like marine snow. They mainly feed on marine snow, which is their main diet. But they'll also sometimes feed on plants. This is then injected into the anus, which then the anus poops them out. Unlike the tube bodies, they do not poop out powderish stuff. Instead, they poop out tiny little balls of crap and stuff. Now, if you were to look through one's organs, you would find more systems than these tube bodies. Looking through, you can find the digestive system. The digestive system begins at the throat and moves down to the first stomach. That's right, these guys have more than one stomach. The first stomach extracts the nutrients from the food that they have consumed. The second stomach burns it in acid and bacteria. And then as it moves through the intestines, it develops a strange ball-like shape, and then it is pooped out as it moves through the intestines. So when you are looking down the seabed and see random, strange, perfectly sphere balls of strange, smelly stuff, do not touch it. And then this is not the nervous system, the circulatory system. Unlike the tube bodies, these guys do have blood. Their blood is blue, similar to some species of spiders or cephalopods. They have a heart that pumps this blue blood all over their bodies. So, yeah, these guys and their descendants are going to have blue blood. Is this cool or creepy? And then this is the male reproductive organ. The male reproductive organ begins at the two ball-like structures near the base of the limbs. These are basically the creature's testicles. The testicles create the sperm-like structures and then push it up through these strange tubes into this very primitive spot. This spot has a tiny little opening that will open when it's time for them to produce the sperm, in which they stuff it into the female, and, well, the cycle repeats again. I'm not getting too in-depth into this, but you get the premise. Then there's the female organs. The female organs develop eggs within their bodies, and then into a strange tube-like structure, in which they get the sperm and then develop eggs. And then the eggs are pooped out once they are fertilized and ditched, and then then the larva will hatch. This is the nervous system of one. Now, unlike the tube bodies, these guys actually have a brain and actually are a bit more complex in thinking. Well, not too complex. They probably are about as smart as an earthworm, but still, it's better than a tube body. No offense to tube bodies out there. But these guys actually have nerves around the bodies and simple brains around it. They can feel and think very clearly. Well, as clearly as one of these creatures can think. This is what their larva looks like. They have a bit of a more flat, worm-like bodies with strange tendrils that they kind of use to move. And then they slowly develop bigger bodies and then grow into these, starfish-looking creatures. Now, I could end this episode here, but no. We're going to be talking about this guy. These guys are also pretty complex. These are the tripod worms. Now, you might be thinking, why is it called a tripod worm? It doesn't have any limbs. Well, it gets its name from its tripod jaw. It has two jaw-like structures that it uses to eat. I know, very creative name. Thank you. They have a three-part jaw with one large jaw at the very top and two lower jaws. So its descendants are going to have very strange jaw structure. Internally, the creature also has two stomachs because they are actually pretty closely related to the strange starfish-like creatures, 4 stars. Which then it has a similar structure. The first stomach extracts the nutrients, and the second stomach burns it all through acids. Then it moves through the intestines and then out the butt. Instead of it being perfect circles, it's more like tube stuff. It's a bit disgusting, so I'm not going to get too in-depth into it, but, I mean, that's just life for these guys. Then there is the nervous system. The nervous system begins at the brain. The brain is a bit more complex than the simple 4-star-like creatures. Their brains are way more complex. They can think better. Well, they're not very smart. Their brain are still very primitive, but still it's enough for them to be smarter than most creatures on here. They have a long spinal cord and, well, simple nerves that run through their bodies so they can feel stuff. Then this is their circulatory system. Their heart pumps blood. Unlike the 4-star creatures, they do not have blue blood. They have red blood similar to Earth creatures. Red blood is the most efficient blood, and these guys have the red blood. The heart is a thick muscle with muscles contracting around it, pumping blood throughout. And basically, these guys are pretty good at pumping blood. Then there is the reproductive organ. Instead of me talking about the male reproductive organ first, we'll start with the females. The female's reproductive organ is around the tip of their tails, and it is very similar to the starfish-like creature, the 4 stars, and it develops eggs when the sperm goes in there, and then ejects them back out and lays them around the superinch of their bodies. But this is on the very top of their tail, and you might be wondering, well, that's a bit weird. How is this going to work? Well, they just turn upside down and lay the eggs and then turn back over. They're pretty good at that. The male reproductive organ is actually very low. The male reproductive organ also has strange balls internally, and it produces the sperm, but instead the sperm is ejected through this strange tube that I'm pretty sure you already know what that is. This strange tube enters the female's front, which is on the very back of their tails. So these guys mate very strangely. Well, no, they don't mate very strangely. The female's on the bottom and the male's on the top, and the male's on their back because the female's reproductive is on the back. I'm not going to get too into this. But this organ retracts when it's not time to breed, but when it is breed, they can unattract it. So yeah, these guys and their descendants are going to be pretty strange, but I mean, life is strange in its own way. I mean, their descendants are going to literally have 3-part jaw things with, I don't know. And that's pretty much it for the animal life, the 3 main body plans, if you will, of the first aliens. Now it's time for plants. This is the heart plant. Now the heart plant might look kind of pretty. It's shaped like a heart. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. These plants are more like liverworts here on Earth. They grow at the very bottom and sucking up light and then releasing oxygen into the water. And, well, carbon dioxide in the water, they suck it up and make more oxygen. So the oxygen in the water is very fulfilled. They're oftentimes preyed on by the tripod worms and the 4 stars. So, but other than that, they're not really fed on that much, but they don't live very long, They don't live very long, mainly up to a year. In which they release their spores to continue the cycle. And some more plants that we're going to be talking about is this. This is the bloomage plants. The bloomage plants are a bit strange. Well, actually, no, they're just kind of like algae. They form great mats of this purple algae at the very top of the oceans. These mats can be very large, up to the size of somebody's house. These mats can provide shelter for some creatures, and sometimes when the algae dies and some of it floats down as marine snow, it provides some food for some creatures down there. And that's pretty much it for the organisms here. So as you can see, we've got a pretty nice ecosystem. You do not see the tripod worms in this image because the tripod worms are underground, because that's where they make their burrows. But this is a bustling ecosystem where creatures can basically just live on Gura. And in the next episode, we'll be talking about more complex organisms that their descendants will take. So that's pretty much it for Gura, revamped. Sorry this episode took us a long time. I was very busy with stuff and school. It's pretty hard, but it's actually not that hard. I'm pretty good at school sometimes. And also, if y'all hear chickens crowing in the background, that's because these birds will not leave me alone. They follow me constantly. I don't know who they belong to again, but they just follow me. They just follow me. I don't get it. They're trying to get me to come outside or something, but I'm recording a video. But anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I'll see y'all next time. Oh, and also, if y'all want me to do that Spectember thing, you can let me do it under the comments. I've already made an organism, but I don't know if y'all want me to or not, to like post it and stuff. But anyway, I hope y'all have a good day, and bye-bye! I did it. I did it. Oh.
Did you finish the working, boy?
Yes, sir. I'll be right away working on the components or
Start it now.